A gute Woche. The Rebbe started the Farbrengen. So today's Shabbos is a special Shabbos because it's a Shabbos in Svira. So the weeks of that we count Svira Soimer. Regarding Svira Soimer is brought, Pasuk uses the expression Sheva Shabbosos Tmimos Tehiyena, that we have to count 7 complete weeks. So the Rebbe brings the Yerushalmi, or Medrash, but the Medrash says that in a year like this year, the way we count this year, we have, in the real sense, Tmimos, complete weeks. Why? Because by the end of every week, we finish a cycle of counting Sfira. And right after Shabbos, we go in to a new week of Sfira Soima. So it's especially Tmimos, it's especially complete in a year like this. That's regarding the Shabbos. It's also a Shabbos, which is Seder of the week. Seder is Acharei-Kedoshim. The Rebbe continued later in the Farbrengen to explain regarding Parshas Acharei-Kedoshim. And also the date is of special significance. Today is 13 days in the month of Iyar. What's the inyan of 13? 13 is equivalent to Echad. And we find in Hasidic history, history of Chabad, that the Tzemach Tzedek passed away on 13 days in the month of Nisan. His son, the Rebbe Marash, passed away on 13 days in the month of Tishrei. And the Rebbe quotes, there's an expression of Chassidim, which used to say in those generations, Echad be'echad yigoshu. Echad and Echad met. In other words, the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the father of the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbe Marash was the one who continued Nesias after the Tzemach Tzedek. And here the Rebbe mentioned, even though the Tzemach Tzedek had quite a few sons, and we see the titles that the Frierdiker Rebbe writes regarding the sons of the Tzemach Tzedek, the other sons as well, he writes them very high and reputable titles, but nonetheless, who was the one that continued leadership after the Tzemach Tzedek? It was the Rebbe Marash. So the closeness between the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Marash is brought out to the extent that even their Yom HaPtira is Echad be'echad Yigoshu. His Echad, the Yud Gimel Nisan and Yud Gimel Tishrei meet. And the same the Rebbe says regarding every Echad in every month. In other words, every Yud Gimel in every month is a day of special significance. And the same today. We also have another inyan in today's day, that today's day is Erev Pesach Sheni. Tomorrow is Pesach Sheni. And today, Yud Gimel is Erev Pesach Sheni. Now there is a Megillas Tainis. Megillas Tainis is that in the times of the Chachamim, it was kind of a sefer which contained this every special date. Dates of celebration, and also brings out that not only are these days special, but the day before and the day after are also special significance because they are tied with this very special day. The Gemara tells us, Megillas Tainis Botla, that all the inyanim regarding the special dates that are discussed in Megillas Tainis are no longer in effect. Because there are many more dates discussed there than we celebrate today. And Take regarding Pesach Sheni, the Alter Rebbe writes in the Siddur, where the Alter Rebbe tells us the halachas regarding saying Tachnun, the Alter Rebbe brings out that even though regarding many Yomim Tovim, we do not say Tachnun on the afternoon before, however, regarding Pesach Sheni, the Mincha of Pesach Sheni, the Mincha of Erev Pesach Sheni, we do say Tachnun. So from this we see, on one hand, that the day before Pesach Sheni does not have a shaychus to Pesach Sheni. That is, the Rebbe is explaining b'negei lahalocha, b'negei lamaisa. However, in Ruchnius, the inyanim which are explained in Megillas Tainis are still here, even though they don't have any effect lamaisa as far as halacha is concerned. But being that it is mentioned in Megillas Tainis, and true take Megillas Tainis is butla, the inyanim which are discussed in Megillas Tainis are no longer in effect, But at the same time, being that it is brought there, so it does show that there is some sort of a ruchnis de keshayches between the day of before Pesach Sheni and Pesach Sheni. So again, all of these inyanim are combined in today's day, in this day of Shabbos. And the Rebbe continued afterwards explaining the Seder. As the Rebbe uses the expression regarding the V'hachai yitein liboy, meaning the lesson which can be derived from this week's Seder. This week's Seder is a combination of Acharei and Kedoshim. Now, even though when we read Acharei-Kedoshim and we read them as one Seder, it becomes kind of like one Seder, to the extent that it is in the middle of one Aliyah, that this one Aliyah, the Aliyah of Revi, that combines between Acharei and Kedoshim, but nonetheless, it does not mean that we are going. In other words, the Rebbe was heading to explain the first Rashi of Pashas Acharei, as well as the first Rashi of Pashas Kedoshim. Even though it is one Seder, but we should not lose out and lose an explanation in the first Rashi in Kedoshim. And the Rebbe started off with Acharei. Right at the beginning of Pashas Acharei, Rashi quotes Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Mishloi Mashal, he would explain this whole inyan here with a parable, with a mashal. That a doctor came into a sick person, and the doctor is telling him, he's telling him, cautioning him what he should not do. Another doctor comes in and he's telling him, don't eat radishes. But he's also adding on, that you shall not pass away, you shall not die, like the other person died. So what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is trying to bring out, the second doctor is cautioning him much more than the first one. Because he's reminding him that if he will not watch himself, it could lead to something catastrophic. The same thing Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is concluding, Lekach ne'ema, Acharei mois shnei benayare. That is why it is mentioned here in the pasuk. The Rebbe is talking to Moshe after the passing of the children of Am. And as we read, Nadav Avihu, they passed away. They bekalvasam lefnei Hashem vayemusu. So now we are being cautioned. Al yavei b'chaleis al hakodesh. Not at all times we can enter al hakodesh, and all the details which the Torah goes on telling us in Parshas Acharei. So the Rebbe is asking. We know that every word in Rashi is accurate. Why does Rashi have to quote Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, or rather Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Why does he have to give his parable based on a chayla, sick person? Why can't we talk about a healthy person? Talking about a healthy person, and the healthy person is being cautioned that he should stay away from something that could cause him damage. Why talk about somebody sick? Especially a child who's learning Chumash is being raised in a Yiddish house, and by Yidden we know that there's a concept, al tiftach peh l'soten, never open a mouth to discuss something negative, something undesirable. Always talk about the good. So why go ahead and explain about a person who's sick, and also that he's going to go out, and what is the doctor cautioning him? Don't do these things so that you shouldn't die like somebody else died. Why talking about Misa? Misa is something which is the opposite of life, something which is totally undesirable. Why does he have to explain this mashal and such an undesirable with such undesirable subjects? Let him say we're talking about a healthy person, and the healthy person is being cautioned by a doctor that he should watch his health, and it's important for him to watch his health. But why mention Misa? Could have scared him with something and not mentioning Misa. Rebbe says, Rebbe's explaining this inyan, and he's bringing out that if Rashi is bringing a mashal, a parable, which Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said to explain these psukim, it must be that all the details of the parable are fitting in to the psukim which are being explained. It's not just that he decided he'll talk about a chayla, so therefore we're asking a question, why is he talking about a chayla? Let him rather talk about somebody healthy. Why is he talking about a chayla? Because the Yidden here were in a position of chayla. What happened? Everybody was affected by the fact that the Bnei Aaron were taken away, died, passed away. As the pasuk tells us, there's a pasuk, Chol Bnei Yisrael, all of Bnei Yisrael, Yifku as Ashreifa Shasaraf Hashem. They were all crying on this Shreifa, on this fire, which the Rebbe kind of created by taking away the two sons of Aaron. So Mamela, this is something which really affected all of Bnei Yisrael. And it affected them to the extent that we may refer to Yidden, that Yidden are on a level of Chayla. We find, previously discussed in Chumash Shmois, that the Yidden did not act accordingly when the Rebbe gave them the Torah. The Rebbe said that really they deserved a punishment. However, the Rebbe didn't do it. Why? Because the Rebbe did not want to disturb the simcha of the Yidden receiving the Torah and bring in something which is undesirable. Because nature is that when there's a simcha going on, we don't bring in anything which is the opposite of simcha. Here, by the dedication of the Mishkan, what really happened was, it was also an inyan of simcha. And nonetheless, the Rebbe made this fire for the Shnei Bnei Aaron, Vaya Musu, and the children of Bnei Aaron, the Bnei Aaron passed away. So this affected the Yidden, that the Yidden are considered on a level of Chayil. So that is why it's not Stam that he's using a parable which does not fit in with all its details to the pasuk that's being explained. It definitely does fit in. And that is why he has to explain it mashal l'chayla. Who is the chayla? Who are the chaylim? Bnei Yisrael are the chaylim. And the Reif is coming into them, and he's telling him, don't eat radishes and don't do things that can be harmful. Kiderech shaloi tomus, that you shouldn't die. Kiderech shemeis ploini, just like somebody else died. Who was the somebody else? Nadav Avihu, who we're talking about. So it's not that we should ask a question that there's a concept al tiftach pel soten. As the Rabbi asked the question, even though the child has not learned about it, this is first explained in the Navi Yeshaya, but nonetheless the child is aware of it from at home. This concept does not apply here. Why? Because we want to use a mashal which will give us to understand the pasuk properly. So that is why we have to come on to all these details of the mashal. There was a sick person. Who was the sick mashal achayla? Who are the chaylim? It is Bnei Yisrael, and they are being cautioned by the Rebishter Shelo Yamusu, that they shouldn't die kederech shemeis pliny, like it happened to Nadav Avihu. This is what the Rebbe spoke approximately in the second tzich and in the third tzich. Later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe came back again to this inyan which was explained here, and the Rebbe brought out what's the inyan of chayla. When a person wants something and cannot achieve it, and cannot get it, it can also lead to chayla, it can also lead to sickness. When a person has a strong desire to get a hold of something, he's very anxious to get it, and he does not get it, it can also create chayla. So this is what is explained in Chassidus, that there's an inyan of chaylas ahava. A yid can be in a madrege, he's striving to ahava to the Eibishter, and being that he's striving to that, and he feels that he does not have it in the proper level that he should, that's the inyan of a chayla in ruchnius. Chaylas av, it's a sickness, but what type of a sickness? That his av to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not as it should. But it continued, chayla b'gematria memtes. Chayla has, in numerical value, is equivalent to 49, totals 49. What shaykhs does it have? Chazal tell us that there were 50 sha'arim of binah, 50 gates of wisdom which were created in the world. However, a person can only achieve 49. This is explained in the Chassidus regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, that even a person like Moshe Rabbeinu also only achieved 49 levels. That's what Chassidus mentions. Moshe Rabbeinu was buried in Har Nevai. So Nevai abbreviates Nun Boy. By his ptira, he was zeicher to reach the level of achieving the 50th level of Bina, Nun Boy. However, until then, Moshe was also not able to reach to the Shah Hanun. And therefore, this is the same meaning for one who has achieved 49 levels of Bina, and he cannot go higher. He is also in a level of chayla, he's also in a level of sickness. In other words, it's a level of chaylas ahava. The chayli Why? Because he cannot achieve a level which is yet higher from him, the level of the Sha'ar Hanun. Now this fits this whole lineage, has a shaykhus here, because actually it's explained in Chassidus. The Rebbe didn't explain it today at length, but refer to it. It's explained in Chassidus what was the whole lineage of Nadav Avihu. Why Taka did they pass away? So there's a famous maimer from the Rebbe Rashab, beginning on the Pasuk Acharei Mois, a very famous maimer. It's called Acharei Mois Memtes, from the year Tafresh Memtes. And there he brings out that the children of Aaron, they had what's called in Chassidish terminology a rotzui without a shoiv. As we know, the whole derech, the whole system of Avodas Hashem is built that there's a rotzui and a shoiv. Rotzui means the inner desire for a person to become associated with the Rebbe. However, a person has to know that what is the kavanah of dira b'tachtonim, what is the whole thing, and why did the Rebbe create a world and create a person in this world? All of this is based on shoiv, that he should return and should be neshama beguf, and neshama beguf through Gashmi Yisraelim should serve the Rebbe. What went wrong by Nadav Avihu? Nadav Avihu were at such high madrege. They wanted a rotzui, they wanted to become associated with the Rebbe, totally become united with him. However, they were lacking the desire of shuv, of wanting to remain neshama beguf and to serve the Rebbe through Gashmias. That they did not want. They wanted a pure rotzui, only to be associated with the Rebbe. So this fits in here to the same minyan. That's the inyan of choilas ava. It's the same concept. In other words, one who is choyle. What is his choyle? What is his sickness? His sickness is ava to the Rebbe. In other words, he wants to become. There's an expression which is often quoted in Chassidus, Lishta'ava bigufa de malka. He wants to become totally united with the Rebbe. He doesn't consider anything of Gashmis. He doesn't have any desire to remain associated with Gashmis, Olam, and serve the Rebbe through Gashmis. What does he want? Rotzui, choilas ava. In other words, his sickness is what? To become associated totally with the Rebbe. To go out and be united with godliness. And this is why this has a shaykhus here. So that's why mashal l'chayla, we're talking about what kind of a chayla? Somebody who wants to be a chayla in the level of chaylas ava. In other words, the same concept as Nadav Avihu. So he's being told here, so the Rebbe is telling us we should know that this is not the kavanah. The kavanah has to be dira b'tachtonim, neshama beguf. This is why the Rebbe created the world. The Rebbe created the world. The Rebbe gave us the Torah in this world. That the whole ratzon of Hashem is that all in Yonim, that a Yid is coming down onto this world and fulfills the desire of the Rebbe out through in Yonim Gashmi. Throughout the Farbrengen, quite a few times, the Rebbe spoke that this is the Shabbos which is giving bracha to Lag B'omer. Lag B'omer will be this Thursday. The Rebbe mentioned quite a few times about the importance of celebrating Lag B'omer properly. And Lag B'omer is called Yom Simchasai of Rashbi. Rashbi himself said that this is his day of happiness. And the Taka has to be celebrated through Simcha. Through proper Simcha, this day has to be celebrated. And the Rebbe, in fact, Thursday the Rebbe also spoke. Just to mention, I'm not going to get into it too much in detail, but now we are in the middle of Behab. Behab is an abbreviation, Beis Hey Beis, Monday, Thursday, Monday. It's the first Monday, Thursday, Monday that comes after Nisan, and that comes after Tishrei. There's an inyan of a tanis, a fasting on these days. These days a fast are mentioned in Gemara, and it's also spoken about in Shulchan Aruch. And today, it's not as popular to fast these days. The reason for it is given in Shulchan Aruch was this comes after Yom Tovim. Yom Tovim, we are joyous, we celebrate. Days of Simcha. So could be we may have gone a little bit overboard in the Simcha. We may have gone a little bit too much. In other words, we may have done some things that usually when a person comes into a mood of Simcha, he loses kind of like his control on himself. So could be we may have done things that we shouldn't have done. So in order to rectify that, was instituted days of fasting, Sayef to Nisna, Sayef to Tishrei. And as the Rebbe always explains, when we're talking about Chet, could be that we sinned, Chassidus teaches that sinning doesn't necessarily have to be Chet, must necessarily mean a sin. Chet, Chassidus teaches, stems from the word Chisaron, lacking. Could be we didn't celebrate accordingly, could be something was lacking. Doesn't have to mean that we Chas v'shalom did an inyan of Chet, an inyan of Aveira. It could also mean that something was not done as it should be, something was lacking. So anyways, this is the inyan of Tanesa. So interesting, it is known, it's a known fact, that for all the years, the Rebbe fasts Bahab. It's called Bahab. Always the first Monday, Thursday and Monday when we are already in the new month. In other words, always begins on a Monday. And when we are already in the new month. So in fact, it's interesting, just to mention very briefly, last Monday, the Rebbe raised a very interesting question. Raised the question, if Bahab is originated in Gemara and it's discussed in Shulchan Aruch, how come it's not so popular today? Not only is it not so popular, but go amongst Chassidim, search or find out, investigate amongst Chassidim. The Rebbe used the expression Chassidim, Shebe Chassidim. People who really consider themselves Chassidim and Yidden that are Yirei Shemayim, and it's not people that will just do away with something which is mentioned in Shulchan Aruch. They definitely will not. And nonetheless, when it comes to this inyan of fasting Bahab, we find that it is not popular. The Rebbe spoke last Monday a lengthy explanation of it. The inyan of Bahab is because, as we just explained, to rectify maybe something went wrong during the Yom Tov. We spoke that today, after we've gone through so much in Golas, we've gone through that many Golasim, so many Inyanim. Today the Rebbe has given us a koyach that we can accomplish the same thing through eating. We don't have to come on to accomplish it through fasting. It can be accomplished through eating. This is what the Rebbe spoke Monday. Thursday, when he began to speak again, Thursday after Mincha, the Rebbe says that obviously from the letters that he has gotten, it seems that people are under the impression that he kind of watered down the inyan of fasting Bahab. That's not what he meant. Naturally, those that are fasting Bahab should continue to fast. In fact, he mentioned for a person who has been fasting Bahab and wants to stop fasting, it's a whole shayla. And it's a shayla that it's considered that a neder that he accepted upon himself and has to come on to an inyan of hataras neder. And he has to have a valid reason for it, whether it's because of his health, because of something else, which is a valid reason. Otherwise, there's no such thing that a person who has fasted Bahab and he'll decide to stop. Only brought out that it's kind of a limud zchus, in other words. Why take? Why take isn't it popular today? Why take aren't people fasting today Bahab? So you all brought out that today's day and age, after going through so many Yisurim and Golas, and going through so many trials and tribulations which we have gone through throughout all these thousands of years, the Rebbe has given us a koyach that this now can be accomplished through eating. However, those that have in the past fasted should definitely continue to do so, and it does not mean, and again, he did not mean in any way to underestimate the importance or undermine the importance of these Tanaisim of Bahab. Anyways, getting back to our inyan, it was also Thursday that the Rebbe spoke at length also about the importance of celebrating Lag B'Omer. And gathering children and adults, anoshim, v'taf, men, women, and children, and to celebrate accordingly Lag B'Omer. Naturally, everything should be done in a way, men separate and women separate, that shouldn't lead to any taruvis, has to be done as accordance to halacha. But at the same time, it's something which is extremely important and very meaningful. We spoke about it Thursday and today again, several times throughout the Farbrengen, earlier and later. In fact, the Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen with the same inyan, bringing out how it is everyone's obligation to take part in Lag B'Omer celebrations, and it's a very so Yom Simchasei Shel Rashbi. This is the day which Rashbi refers to it as his day of his simcha. The Rebbe brought it. There's a Gemara, Kedai Rab Shimon Lismoi Chalav B'Shas Hatchak. Simple meaning of the Gemara is when there's a machlokes between Rab Shimon and the Rabbanon.
and other sages, even though the halacha may be like other sages, b'shas hatchak, which would mean, in other words, b'di'evet, we can rely on the opinion of Reb Shimon also, even though we're not accepting his opinion lahalacha. The Rebbe brings the taich, kedai Reb Shimon lismech alav b'shas hatchak. What does tchak mean? Tchak means in an unusual circumstance, in an inconvenient circumstance, when it is eng, when it is very uncomfortable. And what do Chazal say? That when Yidden are in such a time, then we can rely on Reb Shimon. Why? Because then Reb Shimon will come along and help. So we are in a time of Shas Atchak. So Kedai Reb Shimon lismech alav b'Shas Atchak, and here we have an opportunity to celebrate his day, Reb Shimon's day. Here the Rebbe also brought out that there's a Gemara that Reb Shimon ben Yochai said, Yechilna lifter es ha'olam min hadin. Rashbi said on himself that he can pater the entire world from din, from judgment. He says this is a statement which has to be understood. We're talking about a person like Reb Shimon ben Yochai. The Rebbe says, no fool will accuse Reb Shimon ben Yochai that he said it mitzad the fact that he was holding from himself. And nonetheless, he says that Yechilna, he has the capability of lifter es ha'olam, to pater the entire world from judgment. Rebbe brought out that there's a Zohar someplace. Rebbe says, in our edition of Zohar we don't find it, but it is quoted by the Alter Rebbe in Chassidus, where he brings out that there's an opportunity for a person to be in a madrega of a tzaddik. And when the person is in a madrega of a tzaddik, and he does tshuva properly, he does a proper tshuva, this affects not only him, but it can affect and may affect the entire world, and it can lead to Geula. So from here we see the koiches which the Rebbe has given every single Yid. And when Reb Shimon ben Yochai is talking about Yechilna lifter es ha'olam min hadin, he means this, he's referring to this same concept. He does not mean chas v'shus. In other words, Reb Shimon ben Yochai is telling us the great koiches which the Rebbe gave every Yid, and he himself as one of every Yid. And every Yid has this koich. Every Yid has this koich to reach to the level of a tzaddik, and reach to such madrege, and do tshuva, and then his tshuva will affect the entire world that it will bring to Giyul. And this is the pshat, and the same thing which Reb Shimon ben Yochai is saying regarding himself. In fact, the Rebbe also mentioned there is a chazal mefakchen al tzorchei tzibur b'Shabbos, that we take care on public matters on Shabbos. Mela, based on that, Rebbe also urged to make sure that the Lag B'omer participations, which will be this Thursday, will be proper ones. The Rebbe says the simple taich of mefakchen means we take care of. However, mefakchen has another taich. Mefakchen in Hebrew also has a shaykhs to the word pikeach. Pikeach means smart. In other words, it's an Indian of smartness, it's an Indian of wisdom to make sure that we are taking care of the needs, of the matters which are relevant for the entire week. In Yom of Kedusha, we are concerned about them on Shabbos. And the same thing is regarding the celebration of the day of Reb Shimon ben Yochai, which will be on Lag B'omer. The Rebbe continued in Parshas Kedoshim, and also explained the first Rashi in Parshas Kedoshim. And here Rashi tells us, Milamei shenemra Parsha zu behakel, that when the Rebbe said this Parsha, it was spoken behakel, because most of major minyanim in Torah are dependent on this Parsha. This is how we learn the simple meaning in the Rashi. So the Rebbe asked, what does it mean? Let us turn to Parshas Mishpatim, and we will find that in Parshas Mishpatim there are probably many more mitzvahs discussed than in Parshas Kedoshim. And why does Rashi say that on this Sedre, Roiv Gufei Torah Tluyim Bo? So the Rebbe answers, when Rashi says, Roiv Gufei Torah Tluyim Bo, he doesn't mean all the details that are discussed in this parasha. Rashi is only referring to the first psukim. Daber al kol abad asbnei Yisrael, va'amarta aleim, tell the Yidden Kedoshim to you. that you are holy. Ki kodesh ani Hashem Elokeichem. Weil ich der Eibishter bin heilig. This message that Yidden are heilig, and the Kedusha, the sanctity that is within Yidden, comes from the sanctity that the Eibishter has. This message is Roiv Gufei Torah Tluyim Ba. Most in Yonim and Torah, most major in Yonim and Torah, that a Yid is committed to do, come out as a result of this pasuk. Rashi doesn't know. Pshat and Rashi is because in Parshas Kedoshim there are many detailed mitzvahs. This is not how the Rebbe is learning. Doesn't mean that there are many detailed mitzvahs which are discussed elsewhere in Chumash. But why do we fulfill them as a result of Kedoshim Tiyu Ki Kodesh Ani Hashem Elokeich? Here the Rebbe went on to explain how our approach to a Yid has to be. There are two ways to approach a person. You can approach a person that he has to fulfill Torah mitzvahs, and if he will not fulfill the Torah mitzvahs, he will not fulfill the wish of the Rebishter, then you tell him about the punishments which he can await. Now naturally the reaction of a person will be, when he is told that, the reaction will be, listen, I'm living in a free country, in a democratic country, and therefore don't get involved and don't tell me what to do. However, when you will approach a person, not with the sur merah, but approach the person with the positive, approach him with the v'asei toiv, and bring out to him how by him doing mitzvahs, which is a seder we will have in a few weeks. So on Chazal say ein im elo loshen bakoshe. Im doesn't only mean if. Im means it's an expression of pleading, of please. The Rebishter is asking, please, from Yidden, do me a favor. The Rebishter is begging from Yidden that Yidden should have the feeling to be committed to Torah mitzvahs. And therefore, when a Yid realizes that this is what is explained to a Yid, that when him doing Torah mitzvahs, he adds satisfaction to the Rebishter and fulfills the will of the Rebishter, and then it is fulfilled as the psukim there go on further. The Rebishter says that he will take us and bring us to our proper level of pride. And the Rebbe says, when a Yid has his proper level of pride, then he can really understand and be a keli for the bracha of the Rebishter. Koimimiyus means koimos kufa, that we will go with our heads up. So, the Rebbe kept on continuing. In other words, this is the derech of Chassidus, to bring out to a Yid the greatness that's within Torah mitzvahs, how precious Torah mitzvahs is, how by committing Torah mitzvahs, he becomes closely associated to the Eibishter. And this will definitely have much more impact on a person than when you talk to him about the negative part of not committing Torah mitzvahs. When you talk to him about Sur Meirah, it will not have that much as an effect on him as when we talk to him about the V'asei Toiv. And in conjunction to this, the Rebbe also spoke regarding the Shir Rambam, today's Shir Rambam. It's in the halachas of Shvuas, of oath. And there the Rambam also discusses the halacha of Shvuas Ha'edus. The Shvuah, the oath, which witnesses have to at times go through. Here the Rebbe continued on the inyan of Edus. Edus means witness. But there's a pasuk which is explained a lot in Chassidus. Atem Eidai, the Rebishter says, you Yidden are my witness. Was meant this? The mere existence of a Yid, this is a witness on the existence of the Rebishter. This is what the Rebbe spoke about and elaborated on this inyan. By the mere existence of a Yid, this ties together a Yid with the Rebishter to such an extent that the Rebishter expresses himself, Atem Eidai, you Yidden are my witness. You are my Edom, are my existence. Somewhere here in the Siches, the Rebbe spoke about learning Likutei Torah. It's interesting that the last couple of Farbrengens, last couple of months, the Rebbe mentioned a few times regarding learning Likutei Torah. He refers to it many times, the Hasidische Sedre. Today he related
a vote from the Rebbe Rashab, which is the Friedrich Rebbe's father. Where Rebbe Rashab brought out the geschmack of learning Likutei Torah, how pleasant it is. And through Likutei Torah, one can really understand, he used the expression, Ilu yedaitiv heyisiv. If I would have really known him, then I could be him. In other words, if I can have a real knowledge, yediyah, in him, in the Rabbeinu Shalom, then heyisiv, then I can be part of him. In other words, what the Rebbe Rashab was trying to bring out, it was to have a proper understanding in Getlichkeit, to have a proper understanding in the Rebishter. A Yid can gain this through learning Likutei Torah. While talking about Likutei Torah, Rebbe also mentioned in general, we know that there are two Svarim from the Alter Rebbe. One is named Torah and one is named Likutei Torah. They were both edited by the Tzemach Tzedek. Torah primarily is, not primarily, Torah is Ma'amorim on the Chumashim of Bereshis and Shmois. Vayikra Bamidbar Dvarim is called Likutei Torah. Now the reason for the change of name, the Rebbe always refers to a letter from the previous Rebbe, which the Friedrich Rebbe writes that it seems like in those days there was a need to receive a permit for every sefer printed. There was what they would call the censor, and they would go through Svarim. It was a complete bureaucracy to get a Rishaya and to get a permit to print Svarim. So it seems like they did not want the censor to know that Likutei Torah, it comes as a continuation of the Torah. And obviously, had he known about it, he wouldn't have given his permit. And he would have probably questioned too much and caused too many problems. So they felt it would be easier to apply under a separate name, under the name Likutei Torah. But in general, these Ma'amorim were edited by the Tzemach Tzedek. In fact, there are many notes in parentheses. The Ma'amorim are the Alter Rebbe's, but whatever is in parentheses in Likutei Torah, these are notes which the Tzemach Tzedek added on. So, Rebbe says it's interesting, and there's definitely reason for it. He did not get involved in it to explain the reason, but just brought it to our attention that in Likutei Torah, even though Likutei Torah should begin with Ma'amorim of Vayikra Bamidbar Dvarim, nonetheless, there is a Maima on Bishalach, Pashas Bishalach, which is the Seder in Shmois, and Torah has Ma'amorim on Bishalach. And there is also Ma'amorim on Vayakel, which is also a Seder in Chumash Shmois. But again, this is how it was. The one who set it up was the Tzemach Tzedek. The Rebbe also brought to our attention today that it was the Rebbe Maharash who commented that we will notice carefully in Torah and in Likutei Torah, we will see that there are complete paragraphs, writing of the Tzemach Tzedek. In other words, the notes which the Tzemach Tzedek added on that are the same, very similar in Torah as well as in Likutei Torah. Seems like he mentioned these in Yonim while talking about the importance of learning Likutei Torah. As it's customary in the summer Farbrengens that the Rebbe also explains a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. And now we are entering the third Perik today. We're entering the third Perik. The Rebbe says that means we are the Inyonim of the first and second Perik we have gone through already, and it means we are coming to a yet higher Madrega, to a Madrega of the third Perik. Bechlal, there's a general rule in Mishnah that Mishnah speaks beloshon k'tzorah. Mishnah speaks as brief as possible. Clear and precise to relate the message, whether it is a halacha or whatever Mishnah wants to relate to us. So let us come look into the beginning of the third Perik. The third Perik begins with a saying of Akavya b'Mahalal Eloimer. Akavya b'Mahalal said, what did he say? Histakil b'shloisha dvarim, look into three things, ve'ein atabola de aver, and you will not come to an aver. Okay. Then he goes on, da ma'ayim basa, know where you come from, u'la'on atahelach, where you are heading to, v'lifnei mi ata osa l'tnei v'cheshben, and whom are we going to give a report to? Who are we going to account to?
Then he goes on again. Ma'ayim basa, mitipa schlucha. Where are we heading to? Gives an answer. Lifnei mi ata osid litin din v'cheshbain. Lifnei melech malcham lochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Based on the rule that every word in Mishnah is so limited, and Mishnah speaks b'lashon Chazarah, so clear and precise, how should have Akavya ben Malal said, Histakil b'shloisha dvarim, look into three things, and right away go on and explain what the three things are. Histakil b'shloisha dvarim, not tell us, remember where you come from, remember where you're heading to, remember who you're going to account to. And then he starts asking, where are you coming from? Where are we heading to? Actually, the Mishnah, if we look carefully, is broken down into three stages. First, he gives a general introduction. Look into three things. That's one. Then he lists the three things, but he does not explain them. Then he goes on and he asks, yes, Ma'ayim basa, and he gives a response. La'ana tahaylach, and he responds. And the same thing on the third. He could have included it all into one sentence. Look into these three things, where you come from, where you're heading to, and say right away. Histakel b'shloisha dvarim. And the first one is, Ma'ayim basa, mitipa schucha, va'atahaylach la'makayim afarima v'saleya, we would have saved a lot of words, and it would have came out much clearer. And here he's giving it's a long Mishnah with a long explanation. And why? Basically what the Rebbe explained was, it's a deeper Indian, but basic nekuda of it is, that being that it is divided into three parts, the Mishnah, Akavya b'malala is talking about three separate levels. First, he gives a general introduction. He's talking to every person. Look into three things. If you look into these three things, you wouldn't come to an Avera. What are the three things? So we're talking about a person on level one. So the three things are very simple for him to understand. It's a message to him, so he's one of them. Naturally, it has to do with the one who created him, who was Hashem. So we have already the second. And if we want to know the third of the things, the Rebishter created him in this world for some sort of a goal, to fulfill Torah mitzvahs, and it is through the world which he was created. So that is the first level. Histakil b'shloisha dvarim ve'in atabol l'de'avim. Then when Akavya b'malal continues, Da ma'ayim bosa, ula'ona tahoylech, v'lefnimiyat ha'osed litnin v'cheshben, here he's talking about a second level already. As mentioned, it was a hard Indian, but just briefly, best of my recollection, ma'ayim bosa means a madrega of ayin. There's a Gemara, the Gemara says, Ein Mazel Yisrael, that Yidden are higher than Mazolas. There's no such thing as a Mazel by Yidden. So there's a Chassidish Taich, which is often quoted in Chassidus, Ayin Mazel Yisrael. What is the Mazel for Yidden? The Madrega of Ayin. We know Yesh, May Ayin. Ayin, that is the Mazel for Yisrael. Memela Yid realizes that he comes from Ayin. This is already a Madrega. He's realized this Madrega. The Rebbe continued explaining the other details as well. Then, when the Mishnah gets involved, the third part of the Mishnah, Ma'ayim basa metipas rucha, Olona tahoylach l'mkeim afarim avisaleya, Lefni miyat ha'osed litn din v'cheshbein, Lefni melech malcham lochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Here we are talking about a person in the highest Madrega, where he's reaching and being associated with the Rebishter. At what level? At the level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Melech, Malchei Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is something which can be explained. We know that there's an Indian of Melech, then we know there's an Indian of Malchei Amlochem, and then there's the Indian Melech, Malchei Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he says, when we are here, Rabbi brought out, at times we come before there's an union of din v'cheshbon, there's an union of giving accounting. We're giving accounting. However, there's a yet higher madrege he brought out, but not the pshat that we are accounting. We are put before a bezdin. We are put before a court, and the court is questioning us. What have we done? And memela, we are coming out. We're getting the outcome of the results of the din v'cheshbon. Here we're talking about on a much higher madrege, how a yid is being associated with melech malchei hamlocha makodesh baruch Hu. And again, the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe concluded again, reminding us that we're a few days before Lag B'omer, and we should make sure that Lag B'omer celebrated properly. Also brought out in the Farbrengen that Lag B'omer wasn't the end; it was earlier. Also, that Lag B'omer is the svira of Hoyd Shebehoyd. It's also explained in Chassidus that the svira of Hoyd Shebehoyd, this is a certain kind of shleimus, a certain kind of completeness in spheres. Also, it's a deeper union explained in Chassidus that Bechlal, as we say in Spheres Oimer, 7 spheres, 7 midos. However, Chassidus explains that there is a difference between the first 5 and the last 2. The first 5 deal with a person for himself, person as a person. The latter 2, Yisoid and Malchus, this is already how the person has a shaykhs, is relating to somebody else. Mele, Hoyd Shebehoyd, to a degree, it's a certain level of completeness. It's a level of completeness in the spheres, in the first 5 spheres of Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, Netzach, Hoyd. Then we go on the level of completion in the other spheres. But again, regardless, it's also the union of this special day of Lag B'omer. Lag B'omer is the day Rav Shimon ben Yochai. Here the Rebbe quoted another expression of Rav Shimon ben Yochai. He said, "Bechad," brought in the Zohar obviously, "Bechad ktira is katarno," which means with one ktira, keter means a knot in Aramaic. With one knot, I have knotted myself, I have tied myself to the Eibishter. So it's also talking about such a special day, about such a special person, and again brought out the union of Kedai Rav Shimon ben Yochai, Kedai Rashbi, Lismech Alav B'Shas Atchach. We can rely on him in a time when it is eng, in a time of problems. We can rely on him, and how much more time of Tchak is it than we are in now. Memela, we should again make sure to utilize, to celebrate Lag B'omer accordingly. It was also somewhere in the Farbrengen, I don't recall where, the Rebbe also spoke about the fact that this year is Shnas Hakel, and again alerted us very clearly to try and make as many Hakel gatherings as possible. How effective such a Hakel gathering is on all the participants, and especially this year, it's a year of Tismach and Tesamach, it's a year of Simcha for ourselves, and a year of bringing joy to others. And also throughout the Farbrengen, the Rebbe kept on referring to the expression of the Hachai Yitein Eliboy. I mentioned it already. Since the passing of the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe keeps on quoting this pasuk it's a pasuk in Keheles. The Hachai, the Lebedike Yitein Eliboy, we should give it to our hearts. This is a pasuk which the Rambam uses when the Rambam discusses when somebody dear passes away. So what is the message for us? V'hachai yitein eliboy. It's a proper time for a person to evaluate his ma'asim, to calculate his ma'asim, to make his own cheshbon nefesh. In fact, it's noteworthy since passing of the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe always uses this expression in all the Farbrengens. Generally, it's an expression by the Rebbe turned into an expression of bringing out the hira, the lesson, the directives as far as hamaisa huaike, as far as improving ourselves in maisa. What lesson can we take out of any specific inyanim? The Rebbe applies it with the expression the v'hachai yitein eliboy.